Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our CEO Talks. Today we have the 7th CEO Talk with my good friend Marios Skandalis. Marios is living and working in my nice Cyprus. Welcome, Marios.
Thank you, Mamas.
Marios is the president of the Cyprus Integrity Forum, which he will explain us a little bit later what is it about and what he's occupied. He is also the former president of the Cyprus Institute of Certified Accountants, as well as he's holding the position of the director of group compliance of Bank of Cyprus. Marios, thank you very much for joining. It's an honor to have you here with my good friend Colin. Tell us a few things about yourself, and then Colin will kick in with questioning.
Sure. Thanks again, Mamas. And I would like to note that it is an honor and a personal pleasure to be amongst friends like you, and also with a professional audience like your audience. Yes, I'm living and working in Cyprus. Actually, my origin is from Famagusta of Cyprus. And Famagusta, I'm mentioning this because Famagusta has been in the media over the last couple of days because of the atrocities that we're watching taking place there, and for which I hope that the global community will take action to restore legality and the human rights of the people in Cyprus. With Mamas, I have to admit that we've got one strong link. We're both accountants. He didn't mention that before, but yes, we are, my prime, let's say, education is that I'm a chartered certified accountant. And like Mama said, being quite sensitive on the area of corruption, we started and we have set up initially in 2011 a branch of Transparency International in Cyprus, which further it has developed with an addition of a lot of activities on other areas. And today we've got the Cyprus Integrity Forum, which is today the sole non-governmental, non-political partisan organization in Cyprus that has a lot of activity for combating corruption, both on three key main pillars: on the pillar of community, on businesses with the Business Integrity Forum and the various members that we've got there, as well as various activities that in relation with the state. We are introducing ideas as well as drafting new laws and frameworks that the government subsequently adopts, like, for example, the protection of the whistleblowers, which currently is at the Parliament of Cyprus for enactment into law, the lobbying law, which has already been passed, as well as structured guidance and structured recommendations for setting an independent authority for combating corruption. At the same time, as Mama said, I'm working in the Bank of Cyprus group. Initially, my career started with Ernst & Young in Southeastern Europe. And then I've jumped into the insurance sector of the bank as the chief financial officer of the insurance sector. And currently I'm the director of the compliance function of the bank. So these are a few things about me, and Colin, I'm in your hands.
Thank you, Marios, and thanks for that introduction. And you're a busy man. I'm actually been really looking forward to this interview with you, because I think this subject is a fascinating and curious one for all of us. So I think we'll sort of jump straight in and really sort of question about how governance, compliance, anti-financial crime, etc., has actually evolved over the last few years. And just for the sake of our audience, can you tell us, and for myself, can you tell us the difference between business corruption as we hear it and dishonest or unethical practices? Is it the same thing?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'll start from the first part of your question, Colin, and I would like to note that the overall governance and regulatory framework globally has gone into an immense change, especially over the last decade. The volume of it, the complexity, as well as the complication of the regulatory framework has changed from A to Z. I mean, there has been a complete revamping and in nature and in the direction and in the intensity of the conformity that needs to be in place currently, especially regulated institutions like banks, investment firms, etc. And actually, I've been hearing a quote from many of my business associates that banks eventually ended up not doing banking, but basically ensuring conformity to the various laws and regulations. And this is partly true. Therefore, yes, there has been this change, I would say a radical change and the complete revamping of the whole framework. Coming to the second part of your question as to the correlation of corruption with unethical practices, etc. Yes, there is a correlation on the basis that unethical behaviors, and it's all a matter of attitude, is the underlying factor and the root cause of any form of corruption. And if any people say that, yes, I've ended up being part of a corrupt scheme because of the pressures of the financial pressures, etc., that is not true. It's because of an odd behavior. And the odd behavior is present because of lack of values primarily. If you don't have the right values and the right virtues from the beginning, eventually, and this is proven, eventually you will end up in a form, being part of a form of corruption, either serious or non-serious.
We'll come on, we'll go a little bit deeper on it, but I guess doing wrong is doing wrong, whether it's a small thing or a large thing. Marios, I'm curious about...
Sorry to interrupt, Colin, but
yeah, sure.
Because now that you've said that, you reminded me of a quote that, and actually it is the difference between doing something wrong or being ethically correct. And the difference here is that doing something wrong is when you act and doing it. But not being ethically correct is when you are doing something wrong when nobody else is watching. Therefore, being ethically correct is doing the right thing always, even when someone is watching over you or not.
Very interesting.
Good advice there, I think. And I'm curious, Marios, we're still, I think we're all crossing our fingers in terms of the pandemic, and we're hearing some not so great news over the last few days. But in terms of the impact of this COVID situation, we've seen other disturbing areas like domestic abuse and child trafficking and things that have actually accelerated in some ways. It's a serious question about the level of corruption as well as the function of compliance. Has COVID accelerated it, or what has happened?
COVID has actually had a double adverse impact on the area of compliance, on the area of corruption. First of all, the intensity of events, of corrupt events or financial crime events have increased. And secondly, the nature of these events have radically changed. And I will explain why. Given the COVID restrictions, obviously many people did not have the physical contact. Therefore, even in the deliberation of their professional affairs, that was taking place in a non-physical way. It was virtual, it was electronic. Therefore, we have seen a tremendous increase in cyber fraud and cybercrime, an increase in digital fraud, especially with clients of financial institutions, but also in the online trading taking place through an e-business platform. We have seen a lot of crimes and an increase in these crimes taking place. And at the same time, the nature of the crime became a bit more intellectual. people, and especially fraudsters, they have found the opportunity during this pandemic to get more specialized and more kind of trained on areas of digitization, and we have seen these new techniques coming up on the surface. At the same time, we need to mention that COVID-19 restrictions have given the push that we needed and we wanted for some restructuring and reformation in the way that business is taking place. We have always, and this is out of my personal experience and as head of the compliance function of Bank of Cyprus, is that we've been striving as an institution to introduce a number of digitized solutions. And obviously, we are going to be offering digitized channels for your products and services. And you are supporting services as your control functions as well need to be digitized as well. And that's why we're trying to introduce revolutionary ways of transforming the traditional due diligence way of onboarding clients into a digital one. But obviously there was big hurdles, regulatory hurdles, operational hurdles that unless you've been thrown into the trouble, you wouldn't be finding solutions. Well, COVID-19 was actually the opportunity that pushed us into deep waters. And there, in collaboration with the regulators, we have devised such ways. And actually today, and this is something of interest and for Romania, we're actually the first financial institution that we have already commenced and we are live offering digital verification ways. Therefore, our clients, our physical clients at the moment, and by the end of the year, our legal clients, they are in a position to be onboarded as clients in the bank via their mobile phone without even bringing hard copy documents, certified documents, nothing. Therefore, this is a unique breakthrough, which without COVID, I don't think could have had it being live in the next 5 years, or even say next decade.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's true to say in most business is in terms of the implementation of technology, COVID has enabled the acceleration of that because people haven't been in the office, etc. But you're just staying on this technology subject, Marios, because I'm kind of curious you touched on it there. And I guess, more than 10 years ago when the technology to enable further detection and more detailed detection wasn't there. Corruption has been with us for thousands of years, of course. So I guess the detection, technology's brought the detection, but I'm just curious, is it a game that the lawbreakers and the people chasing them, is this a game? And who is ahead of the game at the moment in terms of the, as you mentioned, the sophisticated use of technology to commit these crimes? Are we ahead of the game, or is it a continuing challenge?
The fraudsters have always been ahead of the game, and the fraudsters will always be ahead of the game, unfortunately. Because as long as you've got incidents of corruption, even small ones, it means that the fraudsters are ahead of the game. And black economy will always be present. What we are striving to do is not to eliminate any form of corruption. It's not to eliminate any form of black economy. This will ever be there. And it's going to be a fallacy if anybody comes out and says, we're going to combat corruption completely. That's never going to happen. What we can do, though, is restrict it to the absolute minimum. We just want black economy to be a very, very, very small percentage of the overall global GDP. We don't want it to increase year after year after year. And this is what's happening at the moment. Every year we see an increase. We were on the level of billions, we've reached the level of trillions, and the trillions now are increasing at an even greater pace over the last few years based on the latest statistics of the United Nations. Therefore, our aim is to be there and is to focus more on the actual, because you've mentioned detection, but we need to be focusing more on the actual prevention of corruption taking place. Therefore, we need to devise ways and be ahead of the game. And of course, we need a lot of investment to this respect and a lot of technical expertise and competency.
So it's the deterrent is almost as important as the actual acts of finding these people. I want to move on to, because really, you know, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about me personally in terms of my personal image, and we'll come on to that in a moment. I want to broaden that out to countries as well, because, you know, it's always a challenge for certain countries that may have had a history of, let's call it corruption. Let's use that word. You know, and it takes a long time to get rid of a bad reputation. As we know, we can get a good reputation quickly, but a bad one. You know, how does corruption affect a country's image, and how can that be? How can that be diminished? And what do you consider the upcoming challenges in this area as we're starting to, you know, we've talked about where we are up to now. What is it going forward in terms of the challenges in this particular subject? So you have two questions there, my friend.
Yeah. Okay. Coming to your first question, I mean, how direct is the impact of, or indirect is the impact of corruption in an economy, in a country? I would say that it has a direct impact. And I would like to refer to certain research that has been taking place by Transparency International, which indicates that with every position, downward position in the corruption perception index that takes place in a country, that has a direct impact on the actual GDP of that country.
Wow.
It has a direct impact. That's what the research have indicated. And also, the same research has indicated that such an impact could even be an impact on the tourism of that country. So you can imagine that certain tourists, especially from highly conformity and highly compliant jurisdictions like Denmark, like Sweden, like Norway, they look on these things. And when it comes to the side of visiting a country, let's say, or visiting Greece, for example, or visiting Cyprus, which is a paradise for me for tourism, they still consider their level of corruption when deciding to go or not to go there. Wow. So if we consider this, then we can determine the significance and the importance that corruption plays in any state. And that's why governments and private sector need to work side by side and hold hands in actually combating this kind of cancer that is in place.
Wow, that's quite a profound piece of information you've given us. I never thought about the domino effect, I guess. Marios, if I can come to you just for a second. You've been in Romania for many years. You're involved in accounting, also auditing, and really sort of helping customers. Based on what Marios just said there, what is your sort of reflection on, let's say, the evolution in this country in terms of diminishing any doubt that investors have or tourists have, as Marios sort of, I'm still shocked by that. Marios, what's your perspective of where we are and where we need to go in Romania?
Yeah, if I look back 15 years ago, Colin, when we were first established in Romania, I will say we could trace more the blue collar and the white collar, let's say, corruption, getting a stamp, getting an authorization earlier, or just as simple as the public servants doing their job. They were asking for some money. This has been really diminished. And this helped, as Marios said, by the digitalization that the country went through before COVID as well. And amazingly, maybe my friend Marios doesn't know, Romania is much more digitalized than Cyprus in a lot of sectors, public sector and the tax authorities. this helped a lot to automate a lot. And this was done even before the pandemic. However, what has been noticed is that more complicated corruption cases with multi-million cases involved slowly are getting more and more on the surface as well in Romania. I am not as expert, I am not a subject matter expert as Marios. Maybe it's because also the justice system and the anti-corruption system in Romania also has elevated and it can identify, and the prosecutors, they take these people to justice more often, or indeed, unfortunately, this has been increased and became more sophisticated and more complex like in the rest Western countries. But the good thing is that what we have seen is also the head of the anti-corruption of the European Union now is a Romanian lady, which was one of the primarily fighters in Romania to fight corruption. And this says a lot about the country itself.
You make a very good point, Marios, there. And yeah, I guess it's about the awareness, what Marios touched on in terms of that deterrent and that continued detection that people know. And he rightly says, corruption will always be there. But I guess the first step is to make people aware that it's wrong. And it will diminish from there. Marios, just coming back to you finally, we want to get a good bit of advice from you. And we know, we touched on it earlier, that in the sporting world, for instance, it only needs one misdemeanor to destroy somebody's career. And I guess that little temptation for a salesperson to give an incentive to a customer and all those little things that we hear in the proverbial brown envelope, if I can call it that. What advice do you give to a professional watching this now in terms of how they should be forecasting their future, and what is the best advice that you can give to somebody?
Before coming to that, Colin, I would like to, because we've left an area that you've questioned of your question before about the upcoming challenges, which we have not touched before. So before coming to this question of yours about what advice could we give, from our experience to your audience, I would like to know the few of the challenges, the upcoming challenges on the overall area of corruption, on the overall area of compliance, as well as on the overall area of effective operation of financial services. And given all these trends that we have touched upon during our discussion up to now, the complexity of the new regulations, the increased volume of the new regulations, the nature and direction of our profession, which changed drastically, and Mamas already knows the big scandals of our profession as auditors that have emerged with WorldCom, with Enron, and with all other big scandals that came on the surface. There are a few things that are expected to be predominant over the next decade. The first one is that we're going to be seeing a shifting of focus from effectiveness, which was our prime focus of trying to deliver, onto efficiency. And obviously, this ongoing increase of regulations, which will be continuing, obviously, cannot be correlated with a direct increase in resources, because at the end of the day, we're going to be ending up having institutions with 1,000 people, and 800 of those 1,000 people dealing in compliance and with regulations, which is not feasible. Therefore, we need to devise ways, and procedural ways, and primarily systemic ways in shifting from this effectiveness to efficiency. A second challenge that is going to be coming up is setting revolutionary benchmarks of excellence. Having conformity to the letter of the laws and the letter of the various regulatory frameworks is not enough anymore. You have to identify best international practices and standards and aim in achieving those standards, because this will be giving the organizations and our professionals the leading competitive edge in achieving their objectives and actually succeeding in doing so. Another area, obviously, is that of the digitization of the economies. Digitization is a must, it's a one-way road. Whoever doesn't follow that road, obviously, their own existence is at risk, not just their own effectiveness or efficiency. Take, for example, Kodak, the giant in production of camera films. Who would even consider that big giant collapsing? But they didn't have a vision. They haven't foreseen the future of digitization, and they shut down. The other thing that is going to be quite predominant, as I suppose, over the next decade is the setting privacy, data privacy, as a prerequisite of trust. So we shall be seeing huge investments taking place onto that area, on the area of data privacy. If we also consider the recent 5th and 6th AML EU directives, they have identified cyber crimes related to data integrity, etc., as a predicate offense, AML offense. Therefore, regulators are showing importance. We need to demonstrate, we shall be seeing this importance to be demonstrated. There's going to be a zero tolerance also on various operational weaknesses. The tolerance level is going to be getting shrinked over the next decade. And also, we shall be seeing new aspects appearing. And especially the focus will be on sustainability. Sustainability is going to be the new fruit, the new trend, and especially on environmental matters. We've all been hearing about ESG and how CSR has evolved into an ESG reporting. And this will be seen at an even greater focus and intention over the next few years. Also, the aspect of cultural transformation will be visible in many organizations. It's not anymore about performing well and achieving objectives, but rather it's going to be more important on actually having the right values in place and being a role model of those values in place, and also rewarding those values if attained or not. At the moment, for example, we're saying that an organization, certain organizations are not very transparent, they don't have the right levels of integrity, and we need to ensure that, and we train people. But at the end of the day, how do we evaluate those institutions? Don't we evaluate them by their return on equity? Don't we evaluate them by their net profitability? We still have the same KPIs for assessing the organization, financial indicators, but we don't even include or introduce any ethical indicators. Why don't we evaluate those institutions as to their level of integrity, as to their level of data privacy violations, for example? When we start introducing those KPIs, then we're going to be seeing the real cultural transformation in those organizations. And the reputation, obviously, is going to be, like you mentioned, Colin, before, it's going to be a key issue and a key focus for the organizations. And lastly, one aspect that is going to be a key challenge is the alignment of focus and objectives. At the moment, there is a complete misalignment of focus and objectives. And when I say alignment, I don't mean just on an institutional basis or even on an industry level, but also on a national level, on a European level, and on an international level. All stakeholders need to align their focus and their objectives: institutions, regulators, investors, shareholders, and even clients. We should all have the same focus and the same direction. So
indeed, Marios, very important lessons what you have just said. And unfortunately, the companies, they are only focusing on financial KPIs rather than including integrity and anti-corruption KPIs to their financials. And there should be, I think, another directive or some guidelines from the big institutions that will, especially the public interest entities, that they should oblige them to follow, so future investors and the normal people like us can follow.
So Marios, just you talked a lot about image and everything else, and I want to get down to sort of get some advice from you. You know, it's no stranger to us when we see sports people, for instance, one misdemeanor and their whole career falls to pieces, and we're aware maybe of a salesperson tempted to give that incentive to a customer to get that order, etc. So it's kind of all around us. So what advice would you give to any professional watching this right now and really plotting out their future, forecasting their future? What's the best advice you can give them?
And you're absolutely right, Colin, in saying that we see these failures, and the reason that we got these failures, although people are eager, they've got the technical competency, they've got the drive to work hard and succeed, they still fail. And the reason being that they are very, very short-sighted. They don't take a much longer vision of where they want to be, and in getting there, which road they should be following. Based on my experience, what I would like to offer as a piece of advice from my position is 6 key areas that any professional should set as a prerequisite on their focus and on any strategy that they devise for the future of their organization. The first one is being integrity. Having integrity in all areas of our operations is foremost the most important area. It may cost us a bit more in the short run, but in the long term, it will ensure sustainability and it's going to ensure success. Agility. Agility is the biggest charisma that any modern professional can have. To link effectively the regulatory requirements with the operational ways of carrying out their business is indeed the charisma of any modern professional. The third one is flexibility. Always be flexible. Rigidity does not form part of any modern organization. And therefore, the flexible way of thinking and the flexible way of operating should be a must, even in areas where we can see just one road. There's always side roads where we can follow and be flexible enough. The fourth one, proactiveness, is not, we've mentioned it before during the discussion we have, is not enough to just detect. We need to proact and we need to prevent things from happening. The fifth one is innovative engagement. Unfortunately, as I said at the beginning of answering this question of yours, we said that people are short-sighted. Unless people make it as their main aim, that the reason they are operating, the reason of existing as professionals is not just to earn their monthly or weekly income, but rather to make a change in this world, then they will never succeed. Our aim is to prepare, present, and deliver to our kids a much better world of what we receive. That should be the aim. And in doing so, we need to be demonstrating an innovative engagement in all respects. And lastly, the sixth area is this of ethical focus. Ethics is the number one for ensuring a really sustainable way of operating and a good attitude. It all has to do with the right attitude. And this, of course, comes with values and with the right virtues. And business ethics is now, that's why now business ethics is considered the most important constituent part of any successful organization.
Good advice. I guess what I'm hearing from that, the advice you're saying to people, if you're doing something and it feels like the wrong thing to do, it probably is the wrong thing to do, and don't do it. Marios, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for the education for myself, and I'm sure for our viewers today. Thank you, my friends. And Mamas, over to you for the last words.
Yeah, thank you, Colin. Thank you, Marios. Indeed, we got a very good lesson by you today. We learn the insights of what you are doing and what the modern leaders should bear in mind in combining ethics on the day-to-day business in order to reduce as much as possible the corruption, because this should be in the veins of any modern nowadays leader, and this will be taught to the generations that will come. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. We close again one CEO Talks, and would like to see you soon.